Well, before we go into more details, how about so you just tell people who are going to be watching like a little bit about yourself. I know, like, we know each other just from work, and now we don't even work together. And then we did small group. I haven't been to small group in like a month, probably.
It's been about that same for me.
But
well, I'm an EMT. I've been an EMT for oh Lord, 8 to 9 years now.
Oh, really?
Or licensed EMT. I've practiced for 7 years now as an EMT. Took obviously a little bit of a break to go into law enforcement, but I worked at Shasta Regional up in Reading for many years.
Okay.
In the ER as an EMT, and so decided to leave there after about 6-7 years of that, and went to law enforcement. Had fun, but made the choice to go back to medical, and now I'm working for Saints on the ambulance, and hopefully go to medic school here in next fall.
Oh, nice. So what's if you're already an EMT, what's medic school training you on that you don't already have?
So basically, when it comes to like the hierarchy as far as the who's in charge, right? The medic is higher level of care than the EMT.
Okay.
So as far as the medic is concerned, they're doing the IV, they're doing the IV pushes, they're doing the drug administration. They're physically treating the patient when it's what we call an ALS, Advanced Life Support Care patient. Doesn't mean that we still can't take a patient if it's deemed BLS and all that. But there's just more intertwined to it. You have to know EKG rhythms, you have to know meds, you have to know med doses, you have to know symptomology more. You're basically, the best way to put it is, you're being a nurse and kind of a doctor in a sense out in the field without not determining what the actual diagnosis is.
Okay.
So out in the field, we don't diagnose. We just go off of what the symptomology is.
Just determine symptoms.
And determine this kind of matches up with this. This is how I'm going to treat this until proven otherwise.
Okay.
And so it's a lot more schooling than an EMT. EMT, it's only a semester long. Paramedic, it's a year and a half of schooling.
Okay.
So quite a bit more school. You have to know a lot of meds.
Yeah, right.
You can basically, they get to do certain things that nurses don't get to do.
Okay.
So it can be a lot for sure, but it's something that, my family and wife, and they've always said, you'd be great in this.
Yeah.
Just because I have a lot of knowledge already. Yeah. But, just because I have a lot of knowledge doesn't mean I'm going to be great out the chute.
Right.
So it'll be something new. It'll be something a little bit scary, to say the least.
Yeah.
Especially, because I have a wife who's a medic, brand new medic. And, seeing what she's gone through and what she's had to do it, you're like, ooh, this is quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, but it'll be exciting. It'll give me a life other than just doing what I've been doing for a while.
Right.
I've been in this line of work for a long time. Started out, as a first responder back before high school ended. Started out in firefighting, kind of lost my way with that, found medical, and it just kind of called.
Yeah.
And so it'll be good to get back into that and kind of see where it drives me and, what path it leads me down.
Yeah.
To say the least, but so we'll see how it goes.
And so, and your wife, like you said, she just finished. And she is a medic?
Yeah, she just got a full-time medic position with Saints on the ambulance.
Okay. And how long have you guys been married?
We have been married for 5 years, and we've been together for 10 in total.
Oh, okay. And you've got 2 girls, right?
Yeah.
Are they 2 and 4? I forget.
Now 4 and 3.
4 and 3. Okay.
Yeah, our youngest just turned 3 yesterday.
Nice.
So, and then our oldest turns 5 in November.
Oh, okay.
So, it's definitely a crazy household.
Yeah,
to say the least. You know, you have 2 parents that are in very demanding jobs.
Yeah.
You know, we're here and then we're gone, and then, you know, 2 girls that are just want, you know, us, and it can be definitely challenging at times. But
so, do you have family locally that helps, or are you guys just trying to balance it between the 2 of you?
We definitely try and balance it between the 2 of us as much as we can.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's definitely times where the cards aren't there.
Right.
You know, like there's been times where both, you know, the wife and I were working night shift on the same day.
Oh, jeez.
And, you know, luckily my parents have helped out as much as they can. They live in Reading, so local enough.
Yeah.
And they've been good to us as far as helping out. There's definitely times where it can be trying.
Yeah.
You know, they're older, and so they're not as quick as they used to be. So
right, trying to keep up with
a 3-year-old and, you know, almost 5-year-old it can be tough on them.
A lot of energy,
especially when it's not an area that the kids are familiar with.
Right.
You know, they kind of go and get a little, you know, wild.
Mm-hmm.
So, but also, luckily, my wife's mother, my mother-in-law, she has kind of helped out here and there, more than in years past, which has been nice. You know, really, it's kind of funny because, you know, you would think with how busy the schedules are, like that was right now we're in our worst time, right? As far as making time for each other and the family. And actually this has probably been the better of it.
Yeah.
Because when I was working both jobs plus wife going to medic school, and her working on top of it.
Right. Good Lord.
It was a nightmare. We very rarely saw each other.
Mm.
When we did, it was in passing, you know, or, you know, I'd be asleep, ready, you know, waiting to go to work the next day.
Right.
And I'd have to leave before she got up, right? And so, but luckily, we had some pretty crucial people that helped us out get through that time.
Right.
Which was amazing.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a juggling act,
right,
to say the least. So I'm glad we're past that point. It'll be interesting when I go in.
Right.
Because it'll kind of be like a deja vu. Hopefully.
Yeah. Let's do this again. Okay.
Hopefully it won't be as bad because I won't be working 2 jobs.
Right.
Right. But I'm sure there's going to be some interesting aspects that come of it.
Yeah.
Hopefully it all goes well, but I don't know until you jump 2 feet in.
Right. One thing I wonder about that is, so you two, like, obviously understand each other and what you're going through.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that, like, that provides both of you the insight to really be there for each other, empathize, and communicate pretty well. Yeah. So that could definitely be a plus, but also you could both just be, like, so burnt out at the exact same time. Like, how do you cope with that?
I mean, luckily, it's tough, right? Because yes, I can understand what she's going through. She can understand what I'm going through nowadays. Mm-hmm. When we first were married, when we first got married, when we first started dating, right? I was obviously working, you know, in a first responder capacity. So she didn't quite understand what I was going through.
Right.
And I kept a lot of things bottled because that was just how it was.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, because she understands it, sees what I've seen, or is starting to see what I've seen throughout my time.
Yeah.
She understands there's certain aspects where it's kind of tough to talk initially, right? You kind of have to almost be ready to talk before you talk.
Yeah.
But luckily she also can read me like a book.
You know? So even if you're not ready to talk, she might just know.
Yeah. She might just know, and she's like, something's not right. We need to do something. And she may not directly ask me, hey, what's going on with you? But she'll try and find ways to, get me not necessarily distracted, but divert my attention.
Right.
Right. Like, hey, why don't you go have lunch with your dad? I'll watch the girls. Or, hey, why don't we go out on a date or whatever and somebody watches the girls? Or why don't you go golfing with a couple buddies?
Yeah.
Right. Which it's helped me out phenomenally.
Yeah.
Especially as of late. To kind of get centered within being me. Once you lose a certain aspect, or you kind of, what I would say is hit rock bottom, or you get something that affects you, you kind of lose a sense of reality, right? You kind of go into this hole, and it's hard to get out of.
Yeah.
But luckily having, her, it's been great.
Yeah.
There's definitely times where, though, especially because now she has, super high knowledge base, she might bring up something, or, I might bring up something, and she'll be like, no, that's not right. And it's like, so that can be frustrating.
Yeah.
But, it's like, that's small.
Right.
And at that point, I'm like, I don't really care. Like, yeah, you know more than me at this point. I supersede
Fine,
you.
Yeah.
Like, I can't get away from it. Just wait a year and a half, and we'll both be on the same playing field here. Right. But yeah, it's been nice to have being able to kind of bounce things off. You know, like for her, especially going through medic school and stuff like that, she would come and talk. Hey, this is what we had, or this is what we did. Not feeling sure, did I do a good job, and giving her that satisfaction, or the that reassurance that like you were dialed in.
Nice.
Right?
Okay.
It helps, and vice versa. So it definitely has its benefits for sure.
Yeah. And so you said you guys have been together 10 years. So is that like right before the end of high school, or like senior year?
So when I was a senior, my wife was a freshman.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely it was funny because I was 18, she was 15, which when I was younger, it was like, oh no,
scandalous.
I'm an adult, right?
Yeah,
it's scandalous.
Right.
Like, I'm a cradle robber in a sense, right? And, that's not reality.
Right.
Luckily, I had a pretty good idea of the woman who I was with. And she's the best thing that's ever happened in my life.
Yeah.
I knew from the day that I first started talking to her that this was my forever. This was my best friend that I wouldn't be able to go through life without. And luckily I was right.
Yeah. Right.
Luckily she thought the same. But yeah, it was, she got to see me graduate, and I got to see her go through all of her high school years.
Yeah.
And, be there with her throughout it all, the trials and tribulations of, just being, young.
Right.
But yeah, we've been together for quite a while.
Dude, I freaking love that. So, so my wife and I, we started dating. We're pretty close to the same age. We started dating my junior year. And you just don't meet a lot of people who married their high school sweetheart and are still married to that person.
Yeah.
So I love, like, growing up with that person is such a huge advantage, like, and knowing who they were, who they are, like, and going through all that together.
Well, it's, obviously as you get older, you change, right? But you're changing together.
Right.
Right. And, I'm sure just like you've seen people who married their high school sweetheart, and then year or two down the road after they get married, they're divorced, right? Because they changed.
Because they changed, yeah.
All right. Like, yes, everybody changes. But you have to also be willing to change with them, or understand what the change is, and still have that love and affection. And, luckily for us, I mean, we've had our trials and tribulations, don't get me wrong. Like, every relationship does, but luckily we've always come back to, it's us.
Right.
Right. And, we wouldn't be the same if we weren't with each other.
Right. That's the thing is like getting married younger by no means makes life easier.
Mm-mm.
But it's like this idea of like, oh, well, they changed. Like, well, of course they changed. I bet you did too. Like, would you want to marry someone who literally never changed?
Yeah.
And as you go through life for decades, so unless you're getting married at like 80, odds are like the person that my wife started dating in 2004, that person does not exist today.
Yeah.
The person who joined the Army in 2007, the person who got out of the Army in 2010, like my wife has been married to completely different people throughout that period, and not all of those were improvements, that's for sure. Yes, and God bless her for sticking with me through all that, but like the change is part of the beauty of it, and so like,
it's something you definitely have to be willing to, go the ride.
Right.
And it's unfortunate nowadays you don't see that.
Right.
It's definitely a lost thing. Luckily for me, I grew up in a stable household, right? When my parents were together, they're still together.
And so it's normal.
It's normal for me. And that's what I always strive to be, was even when, no matter what, even if things are great in life, there's always trials and tribulations.
Right.
There's always something that's going to come and drive a wedge, or there's something that's going to, cause, arguments. But just because you have an argument or a disagreement or whatever it is, doesn't mean the end. Right.
Even if they're big disagreements, it's like, oh, and I don't know that I've ever really been in a place where my wife, like, oh, my wife sucks. Like, she's just a better person than I am. But like, there might be a time where like your wife sucks. Like, okay, well, love her through that and help her and be the right person, because I promise you there's going to be a time where you suck as a husband. So like, just have grace with each other, because neither one of you are ever going to be perfect for a long period of time. Like,
that's just life.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what it is, no matter how, you could be bringing money upon money into your life, right? There's stressors.
Yep.
There's things that are always going to be stressors.
Yeah.
And that's always going to drive a wedge.
Right.
But if you live in that fear of, oh, we're not going to make it through it, then yeah, you're not going to.
Right.
But if you just kind of go, hey, we're in this ride, everything's going to work out. Let's keep moving forward and, keep our heads up.
Seems like it's coming off the rails, so I'm just going to hang on a little tighter. But
it's like, you just gotta ride through it.
Yeah.
And, luckily there's always better days that are to come, even in the darkest. That's what I come to find. It's definitely sad to see some people who just can't seem to get over that.
Right. I don't know what that is either. Because, my parents are still together, and, my dad's parents were married until they both passed. My mom's parents were married until they passed. And it's just like, so I wonder, actually, I think about like how fortunate I am to have the circumstances quite a bit. It's like, okay, like all of this stuff was normal. And then especially at work, like, like taking care of myself and my responsibilities seems normal to me. Like, not doing drugs seems normal to me. Like, but then, I go to work and you talk to these people who like have never once witnessed that type of behavior. Yeah. So like, man, I don't know if I can't even blame you. Like if I...
Well, it's crazy though, because like my wife did not grow up in a stable household.
Okay.
She grew up in a very broken home. Drugs were in her household. Her mom and her biological father were divorced basically when she was a baby.
Okay.
She didn't know her dad till she was 12, 13, I believe.
Oh, wow.
But yet she still made a choice.
Right.
And I don't know if it was necessarily being with me when she made that choice, or if it was something inside her that I didn't want this life. Right. I want something more than to be, another, tally on this is just how it goes.
That's how it goes
in this life. I would say it's probably a little bit of both. I'm sure she kind of saw, hey, this is what success looks like. This is what a family looks like.
Right.
I want that. So I'm going to make a change.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like...
Right, the cycle's going to stop now.
And, it's no necessarily dig on her mom.
Right.
She's definitely changed her life around drastically, and I give her so much kudos for it.
Yeah.
She's a great stepmom, or not stepmom, but mother-in-law, and grandma to our children. But yeah, she finally made a change in her life to make it better. But yeah, it's definitely something where you have to be willing to make the change. It doesn't just come to you,
right?
At least for people in that situation, because they don't see it,
right?
If you don't see it, what success is, then that's not your norm.
Right. Like, yeah, so I give a lot of credit to people who have been in, like I said, I had a pretty easy childhood. My adult life has been a little rocky at times, but like I knew I had like the metrics in mind, and like I had something that I could model after. So yeah, huge, props to people who like don't have that and still like decide to make it for themselves. Like,
and I mean, even at least nowadays, success is tough,
right?
It is a grind. Even if you have, you're set up in life, one wrong choice can affect your entire life, right?
Right. The economy is not as forgiving as maybe it once was.
Yeah. And so, like, luckily for us, like, I would say we're very fortunate with where we're at in life. There's still tough times.
Right.
And I mean, and we make pretty decent money.
Yeah.
Or at least now.
Yeah.
Luckily, because of my wife.
Yeah.
But there's still times where we're like, money's going to be a little short this week. Like, or, man, we had, an extra expense that we didn't foresee happening. And it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, it can be tough, even with people who have success going for them, just because nowadays. And so, I think even with people who are successful, at least nowadays, the generation that's coming up, even if you see success growing up, it's not going to be like it was for when I was a kid growing up, where I kind of am off on that right path and being set for success.
Right.
You really have to work at it.
Yeah.
And make it a grind from like day one.
For real. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because like we'll get into places like financially. It's like, oh, payday. It's like, oh, okay, things are going well. Like, man, this paycheck's way bigger than when I was 18 and get my first job. But then by a week later, we're going through, Amazon, save for later. There's like 400 items saved for later. Because I never have as much money as I think I do.
Yeah. You sit there and you're like, man, that was a good paycheck. I'm rolling. And then you're like, I'm going to pay this bill. I'm going to pay this bill early. I'm going to pay this bill early. And then you look back at your paycheck and you're like oh,
that bill's going to wait till next month. Yeah.
It still happens with us, even with making better money. Like,
right.
It just is the way it is nowadays.
Yeah. And I mean, and maybe that's something like my parents dealt with and I just didn't know.
And see, I wonder the same thing. I mean, nowadays, at least my dad and I, we talk a lot about things that we never talked about when I was a kid. Yeah. And so, like, there are certain things that I see that happened with him, or I hear that's happened with him, and I'm going through it. And so I don't think I don't think we're necessarily alone in that. I think it did happen. The difference was they didn't want to show it to their kid, right? They wanted to be able to provide the best life possible, make the kid, make me as happy as possible as a kid, right? To distract me from it, so I'm not having to worry about it, right? Because every kid should have a chance to grow up as a kid and not worry about adulthood, right? And so, that's definitely a possibility. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if my parents, through my childhood, had some type of trial and tribulation that I had no clue of, where they're going, this is going to be expensive. I don't know how we're going to pay this. I mean, luckily at the time they had a really good paying jobs. Yeah, so maybe not, but I think I feel a lot of guilt about that. Like, I don't know. So when my oldest was, I always think about like when she was 5 and I was going through flight school and then like working. We just had the one kid. We struggled so much financially. I mean, like, it got close to the point where it was like I was making arrangements to live out of my truck while I finished going through flight school, while they were here living with, like, while they were in Reading living with parents, I would be in Oregon living out of my car. Yeah.
And thankfully, it didn't come to pass. It came pretty close, but like, she never knew that. You know, she
was living
her best life. But now that same kid is 15. And if we're struggling financially, it's a lot harder to hide it.
Yes.
Because she's smart. Like,
she's starting to come of knowledge of this is what life kind of looks like.
Right.
And, you know.
And it's like, if you don't want to take the magic, but you also like, hey, we're just, no, I can't get you that. No, we can't go on this vacation. No. And it's like, anytime you say no, like when she was 5, it's just like, oh, because mommy and daddy say no sometimes. Yeah. But now she can deduce what's going on there.
Times are tough.
Dang it.
You know, money's a little tight this week because I
hate not being able to hide that. But also, I think I just kind of hope that it'll be to her benefit. So, like, you know, she's 15, and 4 or 5 years from now, when she, hopefully isn't, but very likely is struggling as a young adult, like, she won't feel like a failure. Yeah. She's like, hey, this is just normal. Part of getting there. It's part of the journey. Wherever you end up, like, that struggle is going to be part of it, and you're better for it. But man, I hate. Yeah. I hate that she knows, you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's even times where, you know, with my kids being as young as they are, and of course, like, I know they have no clue.
Right.
Right. But there's still that part in the back of my head. I'm like, maybe they do know.
Right. Maybe they see their friends doing this and they're not.
Yeah. Like, you know, obviously a lot of it's our schedule, but there's times where we don't go on vacations.
Right.
Like, my wife and I haven't been on a vacation since we got married.
Oh, man.
Like, that's a long time.
That's a long time.
And a lot of it was schedule. A lot of it was finances. Like,
right.
It's tough to pay for a vacation.
Right.
That's one thing I'm going to find out as I'm getting older.
Yeah.
It's not just like, hey, we're going to go to, you know, Hawaii, or, oh, we're going to go to Tahoe this week.
You know? When you're a kid, you just have to tolerate the travel time.
It was, hey, we're going on vacation here in, you know, a couple months. Cool. I didn't think about how I got paid for.
Yeah.
Or, oh yeah, we're going out to dinner, you know, every night, or we're going to get this, or I want some type of gift because I'm out doing something at a new place. I got to have, you know, some type of heirloom.
Souvenirs, yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's tough.
Right.
You know, like, we're going to Disneyland in November.
Nice.
And luckily, we prepared heavily with stockpiling.
Yeah,
money.
Saving away for it.
Because we want to be able to provide that for you know, our kids, you know, because it's their first time going to Disneyland.
Right.
We want to make the experience magical. We want them to feel the magic, right? So it's, but it wasn't easy. It was like, we really need to pull $100 out for this trip to put into the fund, but man, I could really use that $100 in the account, because
yeah, every dollar you save, you feel coming out. It's like,
it can be tough.
Yeah. How long have you had Crohn's?
Oh, let's see. I got diagnosed when I was end of 8th grade.
Oh, really?
So that would have been 2010, 2011.
Okay.
So I've a while.
Can you have steak?
Oh yeah.
Oh, what the?
Yeah, like, it's odd because I didn't have, you know, like, the typical, you know, symptomology of Crohn's. It was just weight loss.
Weird. Like, you weren't in a lot of pain or anything?
No, I just had weight loss. Went from like 110 pounds to like 78 within 2 months.
Holy cow.
And so I was in the hospital, just kind of trying to figure out what's going on, going to doctors, and it was like, the heck.
That's crazy.
Basically, my doctor, who I still have, even though she's a ped GI doc, she described it as like, I looked like I was from Auschwitz. I was just super gray, failure to thrive. It was bad. It was really bad. They thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
Actually, because they couldn't figure it out, and then because all my labs would come back normal.
Yeah. How do you catch it? I mean, I guess
it was just a colonoscopy and endoscopy. And they finally sent me to my GI doc, and she's like, well, we can kind of go exploratory and see what's there. And sure enough, I was just lined with ulcers. And so then I went on Stellara for like 5-6 years, and it changed everything.
Nice.
And got all my weight up and was able to eat finally.
So are you pretty much in remission?
I mean, it's tough because they really they don't say remission for Crohn's, or at least my doctor doesn't.
It's just you're either having a flare-up or you're not.
Yeah, you're either having a flare-up or you're not,
Yeah.
because it's not curable, right?
Right, it's not going away.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, you're just not symptomatic at that point, or, you know, you don't have any issues going on.
Right, you're not in remission, you're just asymptomatic at the moment.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And so, like, I mean, I'm on Stellara injections.
Okay.
Which, I mean, those have been great.
How often do you have to do that?
Every 8 weeks.
Okay.
So, just a...
And you do it yourself?
Yeah, just an injection. You know, you just... the stomach or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, the wife does it for me.
Nice.
But, yeah, I mean, I was lucky to get off the Remicade because it's a hardcore drug. It is a hardcore drug. But it did wonders for me. But
right.
There's a lot of things that can come of it later down the road. So that's why my doc wanted me off of it. And
right.
Trying to get either by diet or some other means.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been on Remicade since 2009.
So yeah, about the same.
And I asked my doc recently about getting off of it, and she's like, well, what do you want to get onto? I was like, well, ideally nothing.
Yeah.
She's like, well, that's not an option. I'm like, okay, fine.
Well,
and so we looked at some other options, and she's like, well, you know, you're doing okay on the Remicade. It's not hurting you, so we're just going to leave it the way it is because we don't want to mess with things.
Yeah, my GI doc is a big component of diet.
Yeah.
The SCD diet is what it's called. And basically she's had patients go from where I was at and then gone completely to diet, changing out everything. And they're off medications and...
Really?
Mm-hmm. But it is a risk.
Right.
That you know, I'm sure not every patient can do it,
right?
Depending on the severity. You know, luckily for me, like, I have a horrible diet. So
right.
I wasn't able to just, cut out things cold turkey.
Yeah.
At that point, I was out of high school when she finally made that recommendation, and then it was just, you've eaten like crap for your entire life,
right?
So how do you expect somebody to just change like that?
Yeah.
And so didn't really work for me, but I wasn't very
that's the thing. I know I could do better if I was more disciplined with my diet, but like I've already cut out steak. I haven't had steak in like 15 years.
See, that's one of the things on the diet is steak is actually okay.
That's what's so weird. And now I've just been scared to try it again because like I don't have ice cream. I don't have soda. Like can't have like heavy cream like sauces and stuff. Like
yeah, basically it's a simple carbohydrate diet is what they call it. And basically if you go into the grocery store, only things that you can eat are vegetables and meat.
Oh, really?
If you look at the diet, that's basically what it is. There's no grains, there's no dairy products, there's no like the American diet, right? There's
I wonder, like how I don't know how I would get to that one because like I can't have lettuce or like carrots, raw vegetables. I can't do that. That's super painful.
Really?
Yeah. And I've scaled back quite a bit on my cheese intake.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'll ever cut it out.
I haven't been able to.
And I've reduced the amount of bacon that I have, but like...
It's tough.
Yeah. Like,
it's a tough diet.
It's so dumb to think that like, well, that's no way to live. Like, I'm literally like, okay, I could stay on Remicade forever.
Yeah.
Or I could actually just like do the things.
Yeah. I don't know if I could ever get off medication as a whole just because my diet. I mean, I did it for a while where I wasn't on any medication. I did it for probably about 6 months, and then I was feeling fine.
Yeah.
But went in and for a scope, and she's like, "Yeah, you have a tiny little bit of a flare up, and she's very just wants to get on top of it, and so she's like, let's get you back on it, on the Stellara, and keep you, you know, at a good level,
right,
where you're safe, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I could ever. I mean, unless something changed where I had no other choice,
right,
then I guess that I would have to make that life change.
Yeah, right.
At this point, I'm like, no,
not worth it.
Not worth it to me.
I'll take some of the pain. Like,
yeah, so I'm good with it. I can handle a little bit of pain.
I literally I'll go to the gas station and get one of those aloe drinks.
Oh,
and I was like, I'm gonna eat something I shouldn't. I'm gonna drink some aloe, and that does it.
Dude, it's amazing, like that type of stuff.
Yeah,
like I didn't know this, but for a while, because I love sauerkraut.
Okay.
But apparently sauerkraut is actually really good for gut health.
Oh, really?
Had no clue. So I'm like, oh, perfect.
Great. Yeah.
Put some sauerkraut.
More. This is medicinal.
Exactly. I'm like, this will keep me from a flare up. So, yeah, I mean, the stuff you find out, like, the longer you have it, it's definitely eye opening. Like, you don't realize it. But yeah, I'm trying to be better as I'm getting older. It's tough.
I think like the only time that I've like gotten better at managing it isn't even me making like good choices. It's like I'll eat something and it is so excruciatingly painful or just like ruins me for days. Like,
yeah,
all right, well, I'm not even making the choice at this point. It's like if I want to see my family again, I have to. Like,
yeah, it's
stupid. I mean, there's certainly worse things to have in the world, you know, like but. It's dumb.
Well, I mean, that was like, they thought I had leukemia initially.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, because they couldn't figure out anything. It was just like...
In junior high, too, I was like, that's terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, you know, I hated IVs. I hated shots. I hated anything that had to do with a doctor. So I had to grow up really fast.
Right.
To get used to it, right? And be around doctors and basically be poked and prodded for my entire childhood. You know, I wasn't able to play the sports that I loved anymore because my body was changing because of being so failure to thrive. You know, it changed everything for me as far as from junior high and beyond.
Yeah.
Until I was able to get feeling better. And at that point, you know, like obviously I didn't realize how cruddy I was feeling.
Right.
But once you started, and my doctor told me this before I started treatment, you'll realize at some point, like, you weren't feeling good. You may not
you don't realize how bad you're feeling until you feel good.
And then once that happened, I was like, oh, that's what she was talking about.
This is what normal is.
This is what normal is. Oh, man. I was missing out for a while.
Dude, I thought I had a rough go of it, like, doing that in the Army. Well, like, at least then I was an adult and I had my childhood. That's rough.
You know, my parents are sitting there, like,
terrified.
I'm losing our kid.
Yeah, right?
Because, I mean, that's basically what was happening. I was wasting away in front of them.
Man.
And it was, being a parent now, I mean, I couldn't even imagine it. I'd be terrified.
Yeah.
It would wreck me.
Yeah.
I'll work at less than I did at the PD and make more.
So I had this guy. We found a bunch of people living in these sheds on Main Street that they should not be living in. So I start talking to this one guy, and he looks at me and he's like, let me ask you a question. I'm like, okay. Like, of all the jobs in all the world, why the hell would you choose to do what you do? Fair question.
Fair question.
Yeah. I looked at him like, what? Honestly, like, I love my job, and I'm good at it.
Yeah.
But choose is a real strong word.
Yeah. It was more like, just happened.
Yeah. It's like, you could be a firefighter, you could fly stuff. I was like, I'm actually a commercial helicopter pilot. Like, and hindsight, you know, being a firefighter would have been cool. But at the time, I thought, like, you know, I'm too skinny and I hate the heat, so I'll do something else.
I'll tell you, it's rough.
like man, like. But
it's funny how that works.
Yeah, it was like,
you sit there and you're like, shit, he makes a good point.
Right? Like, why is this guy making so much sense? Like,
you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
You be quiet.
Yeah. Don't make me think about my life decisions.
Yeah. It's like, oh God.
How did we get here?
Yeah.
But, dude, it's such a weird job. But.
Yeah. I mean, I've told you, like, when I first saw that position coming out, I'm like, the hell what is an HLO supposed to do?
Right.
Like, that sounds like the easiest job out there, right? Like, oh yeah, there's a homeless person.
Check.
Like, no. Seeing what I saw when I was working there, what you do,
oh man,
and I didn't even know the half of it. I probably only knew like a 16th of it. Like, yeah, no, that job it's tough.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of grind that goes into that job.
Yeah.
And you have to be very compassionate, and you have to, like, care.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, not saying I don't care about people, but I
You have to care at a professional level.
Yeah. It's like, my care at a professional level only goes so far.
Right.
Like, I'm kind of set in my ways.
Right.
Nowadays. And it's just like, I look at people and I'm like, yeah, you suck.
I'm trying to convince Nigel, like, in the event, if I do in the future do another job, trying to convince him to apply for it, he's like,
oh, hell no.
Yeah, exactly. Hell no. Like,
he wouldn't.
I work with you. I know what you do. Yeah. I don't want to do that.
He wants to come in 1, maybe 2 days a week and be like, yeah, I did something.
Yeah, right.
That's it.
Right away.
Exactly. He just wants his voice heard. That's all.
Yeah, right. That is the nice thing about the jobs. Like, there is very little paperwork, and I really cherish the lack of paperwork.
I don't know if lack of paperwork. I saw you on the computer a lot.
I do a lot of computer work, and I have spreadsheets and meetings, but few reports.
Okay, you got me there.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather done reports. Nope.
Fair enough.
I don't do Excel. I don't do any of that type of stuff. I'm a monkey. Here, hold this wrench.
Got it.
Got it. Go do that. Okay. Oh. Yeah, Yeah, I could not see Nigel doing that. That'd be funny as hell.
Yeah.
He'd be giving it, oh God.
I
the
saw
amount
him.
Of complaints.
Yeah. I saw him be like kind and compassionate to someone today and did something that he didn't have to do. I'm like, hey, look at you.
Kind and compassionate.
Like, I hated it. All right.
Sounds like Nigel. Oh, Nigel.
But as someone who, I mean, you've kind of done it all when it comes to first responder stuff. Like, one, you've got a greater insight to, let's call it the human condition, than like the normal, I don't know, normies have. Like when you've got a normal job, like
a desk job.
Yeah, like what does that do for your perception of humanity? Because like obviously like there are incredible, you know, I'm a girl dad, so I'm going to use this reference. Pinkie Pie, you know, My Little Pony style of people who just always have optimism. But you talk to a lot of first responders and you know, law enforcement specifically for me is like, you can get pretty jaded pretty quick.
Yeah.
How on earth, like, how do you view people like in your community after doing all the things? Like,
so I've kind of gone, like when you start out, you're in it because you want to make a difference, right?
Right.
When I first started, you know, it was, oh, I'm going to save this alcoholic or I'm going to save this drug addict, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that, you know, me doing something to save their life is what makes them make the change.
Right.
Found out really quick. It's not. And that makes you very jaded very quick. I try to be as compassionate as I can. I know I have a very short fuse nowadays with it. I'm not like what I was, you know, 8-9 years ago.
Right.
But, you know, I've come to find the world sucks. Right? It's not, you know, sunshine and rainbows.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's bad things in this world. There's things that happen that shouldn't happen on a regular basis. Right? And unfortunately, that's Some of it's just people making bad decisions. Sometimes it just happens.
Right.
Right. People die for unknown reasons on an hourly basis throughout this country. And, you know, it makes you jaded. You kind of just put this wall up and you get very cynical. You get very angry at life. And you kind of just go, what's the fucking point?
Right.
Right. There was definitely a point where I was real bad. Where I was angry at the world.
Yeah.
Now I've kind of been able to come back from that and have more compassion, in a sense. Still not great, but I'm not, you know, everything sucks in the world, you know, everybody sucks, people suck type deal. There's people who suck in the world and there's people who don't.
Right.
And regardless of if those people suck or not, still bad things are going to happen.
Right.
It just is the way it is. And so I've just you just kind of get numb. And you're just like, it just is the way it is.
Right. It's just life.
Yeah. It's just life. Like, no matter what you do, no matter how much good you do, or no matter how much you try, sometimes it's just not enough.
Yeah.
And sometimes things just don't go the way you want it to.
Right.
Or people die. It just happens. But yeah, I would say I'm a very, what normal people would say is very cynical,
right,
and very jaded. You know, but to people in my profession, right,
pretty normal to optimistic. Yeah,
I'm right in baseline with everybody else
within tolerances. Yeah,
right. You know, that's just how we are.
Right.
We're sick, twisted individuals. You have to be.
Right.
You have to have sick, twisted humor. You have to be able to find kind of humor within certain dark times.
Right. And I think it only seems sick and twisted or jaded to the general public because they have a narrower field of view of humanity and life experience. Whereas, and that's not to talk down to anybody who doesn't. It's just like when you have certain professions, your field of view of what all of humanity's experience is like really widens to outside your own life experience.
Well, when you see, you know, on a daily basis, somebody going through a crisis or what is their worst time in their life, that's what we get called for.
Right.
That is the worst time in their life.
Right. Nobody calls to tell you good news. That's for sure.
Like, normal people don't see that.
Right.
They may see, oh, there's a death, you know, from a traffic collision or somebody got shot, right? But they're not physically seeing it. They're not seeing the ones that don't get reported on or the things that they have no clue about. Like, so yeah, you have to be able to come to grips with it and kind of, I don't want to say get numb is not necessarily the best word for it, but that's the only way to really
just get a little desensitized.
A little desensitized to it, because if you don't, it'll eat you alive.
Right.
I mean, and I was to that breaking point at one point within my career, and you have to be able to get to a level where you have acceptance of what happened.
Yeah. I think that's like, I get nervous about how I'm going to handle that because, like, you see stuff, and there's certainly, like, heartbreaking things that I experience, like, in my job now, but nothing compared to what may be in the future. But I remember, like, getting out of the military and, like, being angry at everybody for just being normal. Yes. Like, screw you guys. You don't even know, like, you know, all these people just committed suicide on base in a safe environment. Like, this helicopter crash and everybody died. This is going on here. And here you are, like, mad that person didn't go as soon as the light turned green. Yeah. Like, and I remember that rage of, like...
And it's like, you sit there, I mean, obviously you can sit back and reflect on it now. And you're like, wow, why was I so upset about that, right?
Right.
But at the same time, it's also kind of justified,
right,
in a sense. Or at least that's how I view it. Like, why are you upset?
Yeah.
You've probably never seen anything that's bad.
Right.
Or what is mind altering.
Right.
Or mentally altering. Like you don't have a reason to be
upset.
You're
not justified. But then at the same time, like, well, that's kind of why the people who do see it, that's why, like, to protect that.
Mm-hmm. And it's, it's easy to lose sight of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I definitely did. Where I was just like, mad at the world, mad at everybody for everything, hated everything.
Right.
Because it sucked.
Yeah.
But that's what I chose to do.
Right.
That's what I was. I don't know if built is the right word, but that's how I feel. I was built to do what I'm doing. Right. I don't know anything else.
Right. For better or worse, that's the piece of the puzzle that you fit into.
Like I've been a first responder since before high school ended.
Mm-hmm.
I've been that ever since.
Right.
I had little tiny jobs here and there that lasted for, very short time.
Right.
But I always worked in first responder capacities. That's what I was built to do.
Right.
And a lot of that's probably just my family background.
Mm-hmm.
Being in, dad who worked law enforcement, mom who worked as a nurse.
Yeah.
For many, many years, an uncle who was in firefighting. Both grandpas were in World War II. Right. That's.
So over generations, they've kind of been creating this mold. That's
the mold of
right
of who I came from.
Right.
Not to say that I couldn't have deviated, but
right.
I don't know what I would have done.
Right.
Like, I don't have any aspirations to do anything else unless it's drag racing. But that's a hobby. That's not a career.
Yeah.
And so it's it can be tough, to say the least, with keeping an open perspective to what the world thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say I'm the best at it, but nowadays I have a little bit more appreciation for certain aspects, but I'm still very jaded in certain aspects.
Yeah. I think, like, one thing that makes a difference, like, kids really impact that. Like, to me, having children, like, makes the bad things seem so much worse. Because you get mad that, like, this is happening in a world that you're bringing your kids up in.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, those kids are also there to remind you that, like, it's not all bad. And you see how beautiful life can be. So it's like, it highlights the bad, but it way more, like, shines a light on all that's good.
Yeah, I mean, it can.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it is until you have something that changes it. Especially working in the medical field, as soon as you have a pediatric call where it's not a normal pediatric call, like, they have a cough, right? It's something legitimate. That's when you're like, it changes everything.
Yeah.
Because nothing bad's supposed to happen to kids.
Right.
They're innocent.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've seen it, where it sucked. And it was right after I had, probably the worst one I had was right after we had our oldest daughter.
Yeah.
And man, it threw me for a loop. It was like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine this if this was my kid.
Yeah. How do you not have just, like, world-crushing anxiety after that?
It terrified me. And then, same thing with working in law enforcement. Right? You see all the things that kids are doing nowadays.
Right.
It's not like how it was when I was growing up. I'm sure it wasn't.
Yeah.
There was no issues like what we have nowadays.
Right.
And that terrifies the living hell out of me.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, I sit there and I'm like, I could do everything right as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And it could still end in disaster.
Yeah, you just get mad, like, all right, somebody needs to figure this shit out because someday my girls are going to be in high school.
Yeah.
Like,
and, I don't want to say that I'm going to be an overprotective dad, but I have a feeling I'm going to be.
Certainly won't be an underprotective one.
Which, could have its downfalls.
Right.
And that scares me because I don't want to be that way. I don't want to be so, don't go anywhere, you can't do this,
that you push them away and then they go off the deep end. Yeah.
And I have a fear of that.
Yep.
Like, so
but if you don't protect enough, then something terrible could happen that you could have prevented. And so
exactly. It's just like, it terrifies me.
Yeah, parenting is not.
It's terrifying.
For the weak. Yeah.
It's really terrifying. It's a lot of this. Especially being a girl dad.
Right.
You know, you're sitting there going, please don't find a guy that was like me growing up. You know, because we all know what they have one thing in mind. Yeah. And that terrifies the living hell out of me.
I've already like experienced that. And it's like, are you kidding me? Now, I will say I was a sweet young man in high school. Regardless what was on my mind, like I did my very best. And yeah, already like running into these issues, we're like, what the hell's the matter with this kid? I'm gonna call his father.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is not okay.
Yeah.
You do not do this. Yeah. It is funny because my wife, she thinks it's hysterical that I'm like, she's like, oh, you're screwed.
Yeah, right?
And even my dad nowadays, because he, you know, I have an older sister, so he experienced it, you know, having a daughter, and he's like, you got it double. Like, have one for me.
Yeah, right.
You know, I know what you're going through.
Historically, my wife would always say, like, hey, you're not going to be one of those crazy dads. I'm like, well, I'm already one of those crazy dads. We're just waiting for it to show up. Like,
it's like, come on now.
I was like, I'm, you know, I was in the Army. I'm pursuing this type of like profession. I think this way. Like, there's the odds of me not being one of those dads are pretty slim. And to be fair, when I first came to my wife's house and we were dating, her dad and her psycho cousin are in the room cleaning shotguns in front of me. Like, that wasn't a coincidence.
Oh no.
Like,
that's the same thing I would do.
Right.
I mean,
like, and so the time will come. Yeah, my marksman badges will be up on the wall, and we'll clean some sort of weapons. Yeah, I was like,
you want to go to the movies, huh?
Right.
Come sit over here.
Yeah. It's like, what movie are we gonna go see? Yeah. I'll sit between you two.
Exactly. You know,
I'll find some sort of middle ground that's a little bit more reasonable, maybe.
Yeah.
But dude, having girls, I think, is like easier when they're younger, because I look at like my nephews and stuff and the amount of like crazy destructive energy. It's like, holy cow, I don't even know how you keep up with that. But then you hit the teenage years, like, oh no.
See, I don't have that.
No?
My girls are destructive.
Oh, see, yeah.
I have 2 tiny terrorists. Love them to death, but they are the roughest and toughest little girls.
No kidding.
I've ever seen.
Yeah.
They just don't care. They will body slam each other. They'll hit each other. They don't care. My oldest will do pull-ups, basically, onto her bunk bed from a dead hang.
That's funny.
Like, she runs around naked outside, not caring. Like,
getting the worst of both worlds.
She'll go and climb in the mud. Like, she's not a normal kid, or I mean, that is a kid.
Normal kid,
but like
not princess-like behavior that you would imagine.
You would think, like, she's a sweet little girl. She's got to, wear dresses and no,
it's Tarzan with pigtails.
Yeah, she's what can I climb that's the highest thing possible and jump off it and see how it goes. Like,
that's funny.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, oh great, and then I sit there and go, man, good luck whoever the guy is that finds her, because you're in for a world of dominance.
Yeah, right.
Because that's how she's going to be. I mean, she's going to be... I'm definitely a guy that, I know where I stand in the hierarchy, but any guy that says, I wear the pants in the family, I'm sorry. It's not.
Right, yeah.
We like to think I'm the man, and we are.
Yeah.
But with the wife's decision.
Right, yeah. Right.
Like, hey, so this is what I'm thinking. You okay with that?
What do you think?
What do you think? This is like, no.
Yeah, right.
It's definitely And that's how my girls will be. They're rough, tough. They're just like their mom.
Yeah.
Very, very type A, very stubborn.
I mean, like, even if it is harder, you don't want them to be super submissive. Like, no. If they see injustice or if somebody tries to push them around, they're not going to tolerate it.
Yeah. Which luckily, my wife was not somebody who was like that when I first met her. She was very... She said what was on her mind, and that's just how it was. Yeah. I was very much the same way. I was somebody who stuck up for the, little guy. Yeah. And I said what was on my mind. Whether it made somebody feel bad or not, like if that's what was right or need to be said, that's what needed to be said. Right. And, I hope my girls are somewhat of like that. Yeah, and, right. And, aren't afraid to do what's right in life. And, but damn, it scares me. It scares the hell out of me.
Yeah. I was actually, so we've been up here for, I think, over an hour now. There was one more thing I wanted to ask you about, though, which we've talked about off and on, like especially with the small group stuff. But in light of, recent events in your personal and professional life, like, where do you stand when it comes to like faith and how that affects your perception of your own life and the people around you, if at all? Like, what does that journey look like for you right now?
I mean, I'm still, I'm still figuring it out. Yeah. By all means. There was definitely, obviously to give a little bit of context to it, right? I went through obviously something that nobody should ever have to deal with, as far as, going through a mental health break. But when I started going through it, it definitely helped me. I didn't quite understand it. Yeah. I still don't quite understand a lot of things. There's definitely things that I would say apprehensive of, just because I don't understand it. Right. Right. It wasn't part of my upbringing. Not that we didn't believe in, in Jesus and God or faith. We didn't go.
It was just kind of there, yeah.
It was just there. I mean, I went to church here and there with like my best friend who I've known for 25 years now. We've been friends for a really long time. But I was drunk. So I don't really think it counts. Yeah, right. That's the only church function I've ever been to. Yeah. Was that. But it's something that I'm still trying to kind of gather information, figure out what it means to me. There's definitely things that I kind of sit there and I go, that doesn't make sense to me. Right. But at the same time, I don't know all the scriptures. I don't know, all the Bible verses, or I haven't taken the time to necessarily read up on everything. And so that's where kind of going to those, those small group meetings, at least helps me kind of hear everybody talking about them and kind of go, well, that makes sense. Right. Right. And, watching some of the videos, I'm like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, right. It kind of lines up with just how it is. Right. And there's definitely things where I sit there and I go, I don't necessarily know if I agree with 100% of what that is. Like, but it's also, I feel like part of it is just not being indoctrinated to it, right? Sure. When you've gone your entire childhood and adult life, right, not going to church and not knowing what that truly means or what, basically how that means or what it means, it's hard to dive into it 100%. Right. And I mean, my wife is, she's very much in her faith, and, she believes in, all of that. And, I believe into it, for sure, but I don't understand it. Right. And so I'm still having to, kind of travel it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, easier to just jump into it.
Yeah.
Than other times. There's times where I'm just like, I don't want to think about anything.
Right.
And then there's times like when I was at my lowest of low, which I mean, you saw, where I was so desperate to just find something.
Right.
Right. And luckily it was a good jump.
Yeah.
Because it brought some clarity to me.
Right.
And it really started me kind of getting on a path of, one, finding some faith. And then two, just getting my head right.
Right.
Right. Knowing that what I did was right. Just being able to talk to people.
Yeah.
Was something that helped because
right.
I personally felt initially very alienated when everything went down. It was just, it was a situation where no one necessarily, or at least it felt like nobody cared.
Yeah.
Or understood what I was going through. And so, being able to finally kind of break out and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Which I've never been good at. I've never been somebody who's good at talking about, feelings or something like that. Just because when I started out in first responder, it was bottle everything up.
Right. It's just not one of the things that you do. Yeah.
So it's been tough, but it's been something that has been beneficial.
Yeah.
I definitely need to work on it more.
Yeah.
On my own time. There's definitely times where I'm like, I just don't really have the energy.
Right. I'm like, I don't want to give this a thought that it deserves.
Really give it a thought that it deserves, which is not. It's not the right thing, and my wife has called me out on it multiple times. And she's right.
As usual.
But hopefully, with things in our schedule, hopefully it'll allow me to kind of get back into, like, especially going to the small group meetings.
Yeah.
Hopefully get back there and kind of start learning more. I definitely think I need to do more research on my own to truly be 100% driven into it.
Right.
But it's going to take a while for me to truly be 100% into my faith. But for sure. I would definitely say I'm on the path to getting there. It just takes time.
Yeah. Yeah, especially like you said, like as an adult, when you have this moral compass and this view of the world that is well established that you've been operating with, finding something that like supplements that is great. But then when you find something that maybe contradicts it, it's like, well, you know what? Like, I'm not a kid. I've already figured this out. And, like, I don't like what this says. It can make it a lot harder. And especially like, I think the Old Testament is beautiful and incredible and a lot of like rich wisdom there, but it's also super weird and a lot of times boring. But I think you're kind of hard pressed to find a concept in the New Testament that like isn't applicable regardless of where you stand religiously.
Yeah.
And this is something like Nigel and I talk about all the time. It's like, regardless of what you believe, like that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so like there's a verse that is kind of like the core of the concept of what I've built the podcast around. And I can't remember it verbatim. It's 1 Corinthians 16, 13 and 14. And basically it says, like, be strong, have faith, act like a man. And then it says, let all you do be done in love. Like that's it. Like regardless of like where you stand religiously, like
that makes
do
sense.
that. Like it doesn't matter what you think or believe, like be strong, have faith, act like a man, like handle your business. And if you're going to do something, do it for the love of something. Don't do it for the hate of something. Like,
and that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like that type of stuff, I'm like, when we've been in our small groups, it's like, shit, like, I get that. Like that makes sense to me. But yeah, I think a lot of it is one, just needing to obviously break down certain walls of being more open to it.
Yeah.
Right. And then just basically indoctrinating myself to it.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, for my wife is easy because that's what she grew up in.
Because, yeah, it's normal to her.
And so for her, you know, like, she's sat there and was like, why aren't you, like, more invested into this? Yeah. And I can get it.
But when you grow up in it, when you're a child, whether you think so or not, you kind of want to be told what to do.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know. But when you're a man in your 20s, like, the last thing you want is some kind of intangible thing telling you what to do. Like,
and, you know, it's like, I sit there and I'm like, well, I don't really want to be for me, the reason why I made the jump to doing that was it was my choice, right? I wanted to, you know, luckily Zach reached out to me because he knew what I was going through. Right. And was like, hey, I'm here if you need to talk. You know, we've got this small group going. You know, it might be beneficial to you. And I was just like, I hadn't even told my wife about it at that point because I was in a depressed state. Right. Right. And basically I was like, I gotta try something. Right. So I was desperate. Yeah. You know, I was at a very desperate time in my life that I've never ever been. And, you know, it was a good choice. But I also want it to be my choice. Right. To dive in. Right? Yeah. And sometimes with, like, because my mom is very in her faith, which my dad is not. It's not that he's not. He didn't, same deal. Didn't grow up around it. Yeah. Wasn't that he didn't believe in it, but he didn't grow up in that situation of going to church. And then obviously had a demanding job working as in law enforcement. And, right. He was a homicide investigator for many years. And so that's a very demanding job. And so anytime we had time with family, it was more important to him. Right. Which I can appreciate. Sure. As a kid. And so it was, you know, family first. And that was it. Right. Right. And so that's kind of how I always mirrored my life was family first. Right. Wife and kids first. Why is that even a question? Right. Right. Obviously going to small group, like there's certain things I can kind of understand of, you know, you need to show him first. Right. And then wife, kids. But at the same time, I have certain struggles with that because I'm like, that's my person. Right. This is my family. Yeah. How do I not put them first? Right. So I've got to find answers to that. I don't know what that looks like, to be honest with you. Well, you know, fortunately, like you said, your wife grew up in that environment. So for her, she's like, I mean, for her, it's like she's a fish in water. Yeah. And you're learning how to swim. Yeah. So it's just like, exactly. And so, it's like, hey, we can both love the water, but I'm going to have a little bit of a harder time figuring this out. And that's just okay. That's how it goes. Like, and, you know, for her, she's like, why didn't you go to Sunday group? Well, because I didn't want to. I haven't wanted to for 28 years. Like, this is my norm. It's hard to break old habits, right? Right. Or, you know, she'll be at work or something, and it's like, why didn't you find somebody to watch the kids for a couple hours? I guess I could have. I just really didn't think much of it, right? Yep. So I think if I kind of start pushing more into it, I'll start understanding certain things more. Well, and I'm sure, like, it sounds like your wife has been, like, pretty patient and gracious with you during that time, and she will continue to be, and you just have to be patient with yourself because, you know, like you said, like, it can feel a little unnatural, but, like, a little bit. Whatever, you know, like, yeah, and that's it takes what it takes, and that's okay. It's almost like a feeling of uncomfortable, right? When you have no knowledge of it, right? You don't understand, and then you have, you know, say like a room full of people who, like, that's how they grew up, right? And that's all they know, and then you're like, I don't understand any of this. Yeah, you guys are kind of weird. Yeah, there is a level to that, to a degree, and you're like, I don't get this, right? But then you hear certain aspects, and you're like, well, you should be doing that on a daily basis, right? Yeah, like, well, yeah, that's kind of no brainer no matter what you think. Yeah. Like, So it's like you kind of have to break down, or what I've had to do, I should say, is I've had to be more vulnerable, not really care about, the small things, like what are people thinking? Like, oh, you had this mental health break and now you're reaching out to, find your faith. Like, why should I care about that?
Right.
I don't know why, but I did. Like, for some reason, it felt like I was almost like showing weakness.
Right, because it feels weakness because you're admitting that you don't have everything within you to handle it by yourself. So now, you're going to reach out to what one of my coworkers, who shall remain nameless, foreigner, says, your magical imaginary friend in the sky. Like, oh, you can't handle it yourself, so you're going to reach out to your imaginary friend to help you. And so if you know that someone might perceive it that way, you're like, no, I'm not weak. Like, it's not like, but.
And it's like, it's funny because like I'm somebody who didn't grow up in that, right?
Right.
But my best friend, who was very much in church throughout his entire life, very much so, like he's very, very devoted into his faith. Like, I didn't think that.
Right, you didn't think he was a weak loser because of it.
So why do I think that of me? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I've got to, in a sense, get over that.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is that I feel that way. It's stupid, in a sense. But I think if I just keep pushing forward and stop listening to myself, in a sense.
Right.
And just be more open to it, it'll help me find what I need.
Yeah.
More than what it has.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely things like, I've tried praying for the first time throughout when things happened. And I don't know if I did it right.
Right. Like, did this work?
Like I'm like,
what is that like? Because like I said, I grew up in it, so like you don't always hear something back, but it's like, okay, well that's how it works. But like,
it's like you sit there. It's like I prayed for basically something to go right, something like show me something is changing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it did. I don't know if it was because I did that or if it was just perfect timing.
Right.
Luckily, wife gets her dream job out the chute. Never happens.
Right.
Is that perfect timing? Or was that some type of divine intervention?
Right. Like, okay, well, I asked for it and it happened, but that still could have been a coincidence.
Yeah, like, I know, and this is where it's tough for people like me who kind of look at things analytically.
Right.
Is like, they were really hurting for people. Like, there's a huge shortage of medics and EMTs in this profession right now. Yeah, she hit it at the perfect timing.
Right.
But was there not something like?
Well,
it's tough to say.
It's funny because you can argue both ways. Like, oh, well, that's just how life goes. Practically good time and coincidence. Also, you have this like all-powerful God who sees outside of space and time, who could recognize this moment and starts preparing for it years in advance to lead you to this prayer. Like,
it's like, for me, I've had nothing but bad luck.
Right.
Like, I've had nothing but bad luck.
Yeah.
It feels like, I what I thought was getting my dream job in law enforcement, going to Citrus Heights, thought, this is it. I've made it. I finally am going to the police academy. I'm getting paid really good money. And I get hurt. And they drop me on my butt.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't have a pot to piss in, basically.
Right.
I have to come crawling back here with my tail tucked between my legs, asking for my old job. And then everything happens where it ended badly, really. Yeah. And, I sit there and I go, why?
Yep.
And then that's when you sit there and go, why would this keep happening to me? Like, is something not good going to happen in my life, in a sense? But then you take a step back and you're like, I mean, I've got good things in my life. Right? I've got a wife that loves me. I have 2 beautiful daughters. I have a wife that's very successful
Mm-hmm.
in what she's doing. I have a house, that I own.
Right.
Like, most people kill for that in their lifetime.
Right.
So why am I upset?
Dude,
and it's tough.
I have to remind myself of that all the time. He's like, we both have Crohn's. Lost my job with the Army, went through flight school, didn't become a pilot, was about to go to the academy, got hurt, and all this stuff. Like, what the heck can something? But then I think, like, if you really, you stop and take the time, like, there's probably 6 billion people on the planet who would kill to have my problems.
Yeah.
Like,
and it wasn't, for me at least, it wasn't until I had my mental break and some time off,
right,
to sit back and go, yeah, things suck right now. I've had some things that have sucked, right? Didn't go my way, but damn, I've got a pretty good life,
right?
I've got a lot to be very thankful for, and it could be. I can't explain it,
right?
I'd like to say it's just me grinding my butt off and my wife grinding my butt off, but it only gets you so far in life sometimes.
Right.
There's got to be some type of divine intervention. Right.
There's a lot of bad things that happen to you that you didn't deserve, but there's probably a lot of good things that happen for you that you also didn't deserve.
And one thing I've learned is, like, it's okay to be angry.
Right.
And that's something I've had to, like, it's weird because, like, and I haven't gotten quite to that point where I've been able to, like, pray and be angry, if that makes sense. Like, why did you do this to me?
Yeah.
But, like, I get, just talking to him. Not necessarily, like, asking for something, but just talking.
Right.
Like, it's almost like an outlet, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Dude.
It's like talking to somebody who is there, but they're not right in front of you, in a sense.
Right.
And so, like, and then somehow, something might happen.
Right.
And you may not even realize that it was from something that you prayed upon.
Right.
Months, weeks ago. Yeah. But it's definitely interesting for me. I'm along for the ride on it. There's definitely things I sit there and I go, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
But that's, from what I've talked to you with and, other people with in the group, that's normal.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
you may not understand 100% of what it is, but there's a
and
reason behind something.
Yeah, and how boring would that be if you could figure out all of God's plans and purposes in the first year of trying to figure it out. Yeah, it's like,
it'd make life way too easy.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to worry about anything. Like, there's a reason why you give, trials and tribulations within your life. I definitely can understand that. You may not understand it. And, I've definitely gone through a lot of those within my life.
Yeah.
And I don't understand them.
Right. Well, it's a lot like life. Like, your faith or spirituality is like, the more you learn, the more questions you have. Like, the more you just come to realize how little you know, the more you know. It's like, and thank goodness that, like, people will devote their entire lives to God and live to be 100 years old and still have probably more questions than you do. And it's like, that's just kind of part of the journey, and kind of like marriage, where it's like, God doesn't change, but there's so many things that you'll never figure out. And just like your marriage is this complicated yet somehow familiar thing that you'll never fully figure out.
Yeah.
But part of the wonder and the beauty of it is in the journey. Yeah. And it's like, and that's just okay. Like,
and that's something I've, with this, it's a journey.
Yeah.
You're along for the ride.
Yep. It's like, I'll take it.
Yeah. And I definitely need to get better at being more, trying to get more into that path.
Right. Doing the things that help you figure it out.
Yeah. But, I think also it's got to be on my own. It's got to be on my own terms.
Right.
For me to be understanding of it. And, it took a really bad situation for me to get started.
Right.
Hopefully that's not the case
right.
for furthering it, but, hopefully it's, it's got to be something that kind of calls. And that's how it was when Zach basically reached out. It was just like, it was almost like a calling.
Right.
Yes, it was Zach, asking.
Right.
Or telling me, hey, if you ever need to, like, talk, we have a guys group that gets together and we all just kind of talk.
And it just so happens to be the time that you really need that.
Yeah. And, it was perfect timing, and, it's something I can't explain, right?
Right.
So, it definitely, when something like that happens, you kind of have to look into why.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Well, I really appreciate you doing this. I like it's super cool for us to get to hang out. Yeah. Period. It is a little bit weirder with the microphone and the camera, but
wasn't bad as I thought.
Yeah, I'm glad you're willing to do this, and we can do it more often, and we can take this away.
I'm not gonna lie, I was like, I was nervous. I was sitting there going like, oh man, this is way out of like my norm, because I'm not somebody who opens up.
Right.
But my wife was very much like, no, this is something it's a good thing to do.
It's fun. Like the first 10 times I did it by myself.
Yeah.
And I would listen to my voice. I'd get like 5 seconds and like, hell no. Delete. Let's try this again. I'm like, okay, no, this is my voice. I sound like an idiot. If I'm going to do this, I have to be okay with it.
Yeah, it's just part of it.
And